I was kicked out at 19, with no money, but I found a way to build a life that proved my mom's rejection was her biggest mistake, and I let her know. I did not get a cake on my 19th birthday. My mother did not throw me a party or even wish me a happy birthday. Instead, I received a duffel bag thrown at my feet and a frigid gaze that chilled me as sharply as the December wind outside our shattered front door. "You're an adult now, Ethan," she remarked with her arms crossed and lips taut. "Time for you to figure life out on your own." She strolled back to the kitchen as if she hadn't just tossed her only son out of the house with no warning and no money to his name. I stood there in my beat-up sneakers and thrift shop blazer, carrying a bag I couldn't recall bringing. Later, I understood Mom must have done it for me the night before when I was still sleeping in my bed, dreaming naive thoughts of maturity, which meant independence, rather than abandonment. I waited at the door for her to reconsider, or at least give a ride to the bus station. She did not. The front door snapped shut behind me with a finality that was more powerful than any dispute we had ever had. I suddenly found myself homeless. Happy birthday to me. I suppose I should back up and provide some context before you dismiss me as just another youngster crying about growing up. My name is Ethan, and I was still in high school when this happened. Yes, I'm 19, but I'm not even halfway through my senior year. I got decent grades, worked part-time at a small grocery shop, and stayed to myself. I was not out partying or getting in trouble. In every way, I was the type of child who deserved a chance, or at the absolute least, a place to stay until graduation. However, in my mother's perspective, the day I officially became an adult was the day I stopped being her responsibility. Growing up, there was only the two of us. My father was never in the picture. When I was 8, I inquired, and the reaction was silence and a slammed cabinet door. Following that, I stopped asking. Mom worked several odd jobs: cleaning homes, waitressing, occasionally vanishing for a week or two and returning with more money and bruises. When she was around, she was either fatigued or furious, or both. Still, I tried not to give her any more reason to shout. I kept the flat tidy, prepared basic meals, and made excuses for her when she neglected to attend parent-teacher conferences. I quickly realized that love, at least in our household, was conditional. She didn't say, "I love you." Not even in the midst of routine. There were no hugs or affection, only rules, demands, and lots of guilt. If I asked for new shoes, I would be ungrateful. If I received an A, it was not an A+. If I was silent, I felt gloomy. If I spoke out, I was being impolite. The goalposts kept changing, and no matter how hard I worked to fulfill them, it wasn't enough. Still, I hoped that turning 19 would be different, that she'd see I was trying and would be proud, even if she didn't say it out loud. I wasn't expecting a party that we couldn't afford, but rather a supper, or a peaceful evening together. I was gullible enough to imagine she would care. It turned out that she had been waiting for the day when she could finally wash her hands of me. The night before my birthday, I'd gotten home from work to find her in one of her moods. She was chain-smoking near the window and pacing like a trapped animal. I did not say much. I knew better, but I offered to reheat some leftover noodles. She waved me off without saying a word. Later, I overheard her on the phone in her room, talking fiercely. I couldn't understand much, but one line struck out. "He turns 19 tomorrow. I don't owe him anything." After that, I laid awake most of the night trying to convince myself that she didn't mean it, and that I had misunderstood. But deep inside, I knew. I believe I knew for a long time that she was just looking for an excuse. She wanted her life back, whatever that meant for her. And I was simply in the way. Her load, justification, and guilt. The morning began with quiet. There was no breakfast or welcome, only the bag at the door and those words. "You are an adult now. Discover life on your own." I did not weep. Not then. I simply nodded and walked away, feeling as if I was leaving behind something that had been shattered long before I recognized it. I went 3 kilometers to a park that I used to visit as a child, sat on a freezing bench and opened the package. 3 pairs of jeans, 4 shirts, 1 sweatshirt, a toothbrush, and the $25 I had put in an envelope under my mattress. She had taken that as well. I assume she thought I didn't need it. That marked the beginning, the initial cut. That night I sat at the back of a laundry, covered in my hoodie, listening to the machines buzz. The following week flew by, sleeping on benches, eating whatever I could afford, and bathing at the gym whenever I could slip in. I did not inform anyone at school. I was too proud and humiliated. I continued turning up, exhausted and hungry, pretending that everything was all right. Teachers began to notice, but no one spoke anything openly. I overheard whispering. "He looks unwell." Something's wrong with Ethan, but no one has inquired. One day my guidance counselor approached me privately. Mrs. Carson. She was one of the few adults that looked me in the eyes and truly meant it. She inquired if everything was well at home. I tried to lie, but the truth simply slipped out. She did not cry or gasp. She was just listening. Really listened. Then she went to work. She assisted me in applying for emergency housing, speaking with the principal about lunch coupons, and even requesting a favor from a local group that assists children in crisis situations. I didn't want to accept charity, but I had no other alternatives. That small bit of assistance kept me alive. Meanwhile, I never heard from my mother. There are no calls, texts, or anything. She vanished as if I never existed. I was out of her life. And that was just how she wanted it. But here's the deal. Every night I went to sleep on the chilly shelter bed. I made the same pledge to myself. One day, she'd come to regret all she said to me. One day I'd be far above anything she imagined I could ever be. She would have no option but to watch it. Not because I sought her approval, I did not. Not anymore. But I wanted her to understand that she was incorrect about me, about everything. And when that day arrived, I would not shout, I would not fight, I would simply grin and go away. I wasn't sure how I'd do it yet. But I knew one thing for certain. I would make sure she regretted it. Every single syllable. And the first fisher in that strategy. A few weeks later, I discovered a truth about my mother that she never expected me to learn. For weeks after I was booted out, I kept telling myself it was just temporary, that she'd come around, and that she was probably simply anxious, terrified, or overwhelmed. I clung to that illusion as if it were the only thing holding me up. Because if your own mother can throw you aside like garbage and not care, what does it say about you? But she did not come around. In fact, the more I understood, the more obvious it became that she had been arranging my leaving for a long time. Mrs. Carson assisted me in enrolling in the local juvenile shelter's assistance program. It wasn't glamorous, a bunk bed in a shared room, alternating duties and twice-weekly group meetings, but it was warm, safe, and mine. For the first time in a long time, I felt some sense of steadiness. I worked extra hours at the grocery store and did night shifts when possible. I kept my head down and my grades up. My social life vanished, as did my ability to care. Every spare minute was dedicated to survival. I didn't have time to digest my sadness. Not until a frigid Thursday afternoon in late January. It all started when I ran into Mrs. Parker, our former neighbor from the building. She was strolling her small dog outside the community center, where I had volunteered for additional service hours. She recognized me right away, though I must have aged 10 years since she last saw me. "Oh my goodness, Ethan," she exclaimed, pulling her coat closer. "Are you all right, sweetie? Your mom said you went off to college early." I hadn't noticed. "College?" she nodded. "That's what she told everyone. Said you got a scholarship and left on your birthday. She was just telling Mrs. Turner about how proud she was, how you were becoming a man and starting your life." I didn't know how to answer. Proud. She had not even texted me. Hadn't attended the January graduation planning meeting, where parents were asked to RSVP for cap and gown payments. I was standing in front of a neighbor who was fed a dream while I was living in a shelter, eating quick noodles, and worrying if my uniform smelled like disinfectant. That was the first fracture in the falsehood. And things just got worse from there. It turns out that my mother did not simply toss me out. She replaced me. Her younger sister, Aunt Rachel, visited from Florida a week after my birthday. I didn't realize it at first, but one of the building's younger kids sent me a direct message on Instagram. "Your cousin is living at your place now? What happened?" LOL. I had no idea I had a relative. Curiosity and something worse, like fear, compelled me to probe. Aunt Rachel has a child younger than me, maybe 16. His name was Aiden. I remembered the last name from when I used to sort mail at our apartment building. Aiden has moved in and out of group homes. Trouble at school, minor theft, all of the things my mother accused me of when she was upset. But I never committed. Now he was sleeping in my bed, wearing my old sweatshirt, and rummaging through the fridge, which I used to load with goods I had paid for. And my mother was uploading cheerful selfies with him. Captioned things like, "So proud of my nephew. New beginnings, red heart. Nephew, not son." Son did not exist anymore. Apparently I felt like I was floating above my own life, as if someone had taken a hacksaw to the foundation of my identity and left me to balance on the splinters. The one person who was supposed to love me unconditionally had chosen to reinvent her life. And I was airbrushed out of it completely, but I wasn't angry yet. Not until I found the envelope. I was helping Mrs. Carson organize a charity drive at the school office, and she had this big stack of mail that needed sorting: scholarship offers, community flyers, report cards. One envelope had my name on it, thick and official looking. On my birthday, December 17th, I received a letter from Millstone Technical College offering me a full-ride scholarship for their business management program, complete with a monthly stipend and housing options for low-income applicants. The letter was dated December 2nd and delivered to my home address. I stared at that paper for a full minute before the full horror of it clicked. My mom got the letter. She knew. She knew I had a way out, and she never gave it to me. I folded the paper back into the envelope, my hands trembling. "Mrs. Carson," I said, barely above a whisper. "Can I ask you something strange?" She glanced up. "Of course. Do you know whether it's legal for a parent to reject a college offer?" Her eyes narrowed instantly. "Ethan, what did you discover?" I handed her the envelope, and she read it twice before sitting straight in her chair. "She knew," I continued, almost able to keep my voice steady. "She knew I had this, and she still booted me out." Mrs. Carson didn't say anything, but I could tell she was upset by the way her jaw tightened. She promised to help me contact the school directly, and she did, but it was too late. The acceptance deadline had passed, and they'd already moved on to the wait list. The administrator sounded genuinely sympathetic. "If we'd heard from him in December, this would have been a done deal," she said. "But now there's nothing we can do." I walked out of that meeting in a daze, not because I'd lost the scholarship, but because I'd never had a chance to accept it. My mother had stolen it from me. A way out, a future, and for what? That's when the anger finally came. The kind that sits deep in your chest and hums like a machine. I spent the next few days in a fog, going to work. I went to class, but my mind kept replaying every time I tried to impress her, every time I cleaned the kitchen so she wouldn't yell, every time I brought home an A, hoping that would be the thing that made her see me. She didn't see me, she never did. She saw what she needed: a scapegoat, a workhorse. And when I stopped serving that purpose, she replaced me without blinking. What pushed me over the edge? What turned that anger into something more focused, more dangerous, was Aiden's birthday party. It was on February 20th, a Saturday, and I only found out because someone tagged the apartment complex in a post, and I followed the breadcrumbs like a bloodhound. I don't remember making the decision to go there, but she threw him a full party with balloons, a banner, and a freaking cake with "Welcome to the family Aiden" written in cursive icing. I saw it all. The videos, the group selfies, my mom drunk and dancing, holding a red Solo cup like she was 21 again, and Aiden grinning like he owned the place. I remember standing outside the building, my fists clenched in my coat pockets, watching the party through the windows. I wasn't going to go in because I didn't want to give her that satisfaction. But then I saw her come outside to smoke, just like she used to, and something inside me snapped. I walked up slowly. She didn't notice me until I was a few feet away, and when she did, she stopped. Then she smiled, the phony one she used to give teachers and landlords. "Well, look who finally grew a spine," she said. I said nothing. She motioned into the apartment. "You're not invited." I figured. She took a puff on her cigarette. "Are you still upset that I fired you? Grow up, Ethan. Life is rough. I did you a favor. You threw away my scholarship." Her smirk vanished. "I found the letter," I replied, my voice strained. "You knew I got accepted and you hid it." "What?" She scoffed. "I knew you'd muck it up. You couldn't even clean your room." "What? I was meant to let you spend someone else's money on a dream you'd drop out of in a semester? You never gave me a chance." "I gave you life," she replied, her voice rising. "I also gave you 19 years. That's more than I received from my parents." "You didn't give me anything," I replied, moving nearer. "You took. You grabbed everything and are still doing so. But not for much longer." She narrowed her eyes. "Is this a threat?" "No," I said. "It's a promise." And with that, I turned and walked away. I could feel her eyes on me the whole time, but I didn't look back, not once. That was the breaking point, the last time I saw her face to face. But it wasn't the last time she'd hear from me, because from that point on, I stopped surviving and started planning. I'd like to say that after confronting my mother, something inside me shifted right away, and that I walked off into some metaphorical sunrise, head high, heart strong, already halfway to a better life, but that's not what happened. What happened was that I fell apart. On the outside, I continued to do what I needed to. I showed up for work, sat in class, and nodded through meetings with my case manager. To anyone watching, I appeared to be any other tired teenager counting down the days until graduation. But inside, I was unraveling. That confrontation with my mother, her coldness, her certainty that I would fail, didn't just hurt, it hollowed me out. Everything I'd been holding together with duct tape and denial came crashing down: rejection, betrayal, and the way she'd replaced me like an old piece of furniture. I couldn't stop thinking about how easily she'd taken everything I'd worked for, not just the scholarship, but also the belief that I mattered. Worst of all, I believed her. For a while at least, I started arriving late to work, not because I didn't care, but because I couldn't sleep at night. My mind would loop the same memories over and over. Her telling the neighbors I'd gone to college, the photos of her smiling with my replacement, and that damn cake with "Welcome to the family" written across it as a joke. I'd lie there in the shelter bunk, staring at the ceiling, heart pounding, wondering if she was right, if I'd screw everything up, if I was broken. I failed 2 quizzes in a row, forgot to bring my gym clothes, missed a meeting with my counselor. Small things, but they added up. One Friday afternoon I skipped school entirely. I couldn't do it. I sat on a bench behind the strip mall near the grocery store and gazed at the cracks in the pavement until the sun began to drop. I didn't weep or do anything. I simply sat there thinking, I can't keep this up. I can't keep pretending I'm fine. That was my lowest point. But the funny thing about rock bottom is that it's quiet. No one's cheering, no one's watching, and no one's waiting for you to climb out. You just sit there with your pain until you either give up or decide to move. That's what I did. I made one small move. I called Mrs. Carson. I don't remember dialing her number. I remember her voice on the other end, calm and warm, like someone turning on a light in a dark room. I told her everything, not just about my mother, but about how I felt, the weight, the exhaustion, the shame. I expected her to give me a pep talk about how strong and capable I was, but she just said, "Ethan, you don't have to carry this alone anymore." And then she showed up. That spring, something began to shift. She started checking in every few days, sending me little texts like, "Did you eat today? Need help with homework? Want me to proofread that essay?" These tiny lifelines began to pull me out of the fog, reminding me that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't invisible. I stopped thinking about proving my mother wrong and started thinking about proving myself right, that I was worth more than how she treated me, that I could build something, not out of spite or rage, but out of a quiet, stubborn belief that I deserved better. I poured myself into school, showing up early, staying late, asking questions, and taking notes as if my life depended on it, which it did. My grades improved, and I began tutoring other students in math and economics, not for monetary gain, but because I enjoyed it. Education was the first thing I had that was solely mine, and I excelled at it. I used to spend my evenings at the youth center reading articles about small businesses, investment strategies, tax breaks, and anything else that could give me an advantage. I wanted to understand the world in a way that my mother didn't. One of the shelter volunteers, Jamal, noticed how much time I spent in the computer lab. He was this older guy, ex-military, real and no nonsense. One day, he sat down next to me and said, "You got hustle, kid. Have you ever considered establishing your own venture?" That thought lingered in my brain like a splinter, my own thing, and at first I shrugged it off. What could I possibly start? I was broke, living in a shelter, without contacts or a fancy degree, but Jamal persisted. He told me how he used to flip used cell phones on Craigslist, how he started with nothing but a cracked iPhone, and turned it into a side hustle that paid his rent. "It's not about starting big," he said. "It's about starting smart." So, I started. I noticed that people at the shelter always needed basics like socks, toothpaste, razors and chargers, but no one wanted to waste time going across town to the cheap stores. So I found a dollar store near my job that offered small bulk discounts, bought a few items, and resold them for 50 cents more in the shelter common room. People paid for the convenience. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I kept records, tracked profits, learned what people wanted, when they wanted it, and how to price it. I reinvested every penny. I bought used books on sales strategy and customer psychology. I watched YouTube videos about dropshipping and affiliate marketing. By the summer I had a binder full of notes and a spreadsheet that made me feel like a Wall Street analyst. More importantly, I had confidence, real earned confidence, not the loud kind, but the quiet kind, the kind that comes from knowing you built something from the ground up and no one can take it away from you. I didn't invite anyone to my graduation in June. Mrs. Carson was in the front row, and Jamal was also there, cheering as if he had raised me himself. There was no mother, no distant relatives, just me in a cap and gown coming across a stage with a piece of paper that said I mattered, that I made it. I felt like I had a family for the first time in my life. Not the kind you're born into, but the kind you find when everything else falls apart. After the ceremony, I didn't cry. I just stood there staring at the crowd, realizing that I'd done it. I'd survived. I'd rebuilt, and I wasn't done yet. That fall, I enrolled in a community college, not Millstone Tech. My scholarship had been given away months before, but it didn't matter. I got financial aid, applied for every grant and local scholarship I could find, took out a small loan, and kept working. Evenings at the store, weekends running my little supply stand at the shelter. I moved into a subsidized student housing unit, tiny but mine, and slept on a mattress on the floor, surrounded by textbooks and boxes of dollar store toothpaste. And I was happy because I wasn't surviving anymore. I was building brick by brick, dollar by dollar, grade by grade, and by the time I turned 20, I was running an online shop out of my dorm. Nothing fancy, just curated care packages for students and shelter programs, basic needs bundled together. I'd personalize them, add handwritten notes, and even offer discounts to shelters where I'd once stayed. I didn't obsess over it like I used to, but it lingered like a low hum in the back of my mind. Orders began to come in, and word spread. I wasn't just rebuilding my life. I was building something bigger. Despite everything else, the grades, the business, the new life, there was one thing I couldn't shake. The promise I made to myself that one day she would regret everything. Because while I was rising, I knew something else was happening. Something on the other side of town, something about to collapse. The thing about vengeance is that it doesn't come to you. You have to build it slowly, brick by brick, not in a movie-style way where the protagonist just magically levels up, gets a haircut, and launches some dramatic confrontation that changes everything overnight. No, true vengeance, the kind that stings, requires patience, timing, and discipline. You don't win by yelling louder or throwing punches. You win by being so successful, so undeniable, that the person who wronged you has no choice but to see you, acknowledge you, and regret every single choice that led them to that moment. And I was getting there. By the age of 20, my side hustle had taken off. What began as a box of care products and snacks in a shelter common room had grown into a modest but steady e-commerce business called Packlight, with simple, clean branding and care packages tailored to college students, low-income families, and shelters. I'd built a Shopify store, learned basic SEO, and reinvested every penny I made in stock and site design. But it wasn't just about money. It was about creating something that no one could take away from me. I kept it all quiet. No bragging, no posts. Not even my professors knew the full scope. I didn't want eyes on me until I was ready. I still remember my mother's reaction when I told her she had stolen my scholarship. That cold, smug smirk that said, "You'll never be anything without me." I wanted to burn that image out of my mind, and the only way to do that was to make her eat her words. But to do that, I needed more than success. I needed a plan, and strangely enough, it began with Aiden. I didn't care much for him at first. He was just a pawn in all of this, a new warm body for my mother to manipulate, parade around, and guilt trip into loyalty. I assumed he'd vanish like everyone else in her life, but then I got an email from a girl I used to go to high school with. We weren't close, but we had a few classes together. She messaged me unexpectedly one afternoon with the subject line, "Hey, is this your cousin?" There was a snapshot attached, a Reddit topic, one of those anonymous community boards for our area, with the post title, "Aiden from Unit 14 observed taking phones from gym lockers again." I opened it with a horrible sensation, and the thread had a few fuzzy photographs. A quick search of his full name on Facebook led me to a few public posts, angry rants from people who'd been scammed, PayPal chargebacks, and lost dog fundraisers that seemed out of place. Another comment mentioned that he'd been banned from 2 different youth centers, and a third claimed he tried to sell stolen AirPods at a mall kiosk. I even found an old post from Florida. "Watch out for this kid known for stealing laptops from schools." I sat back in my chair and just stared at the screen. It was all so familiar. This was who she kicked me out for. This was the person she gave my bed, my room, my life to. Suddenly I understood something I hadn't before. My mother didn't just betray me, she gambled. She wanted to rewrite her narrative, to become the good, loving guardian to a troubled child, the kind of person she could brag about to neighbors and post about online. But she was too arrogant to recognize that she was repeating the same pattern. That gave me my first opportunity, not for vengeance, but for information. I started watching Aiden from a distance online only. Social media, local Reddit pages, group chats from high school alumni. He was messy. The kind of kid who bragged about the dumbest things. He'd post photos with wads of cash, claiming it was from legitimate side hustles. He made TikToks flexing in sneakers I recognized from my old closet, the ones I saved up for junior year, and the ones I thought I lost in a move. He was walking around in pieces of my past, smiling like he earned them, and that's when I started the burner. A fake Reddit account and a new Instagram profile, completely untraceable. I used it to quietly comment on threads, spark conversations about Aiden, and ask loaded questions, nothing obvious, just enough to pique people's interest. I was working a shift at the grocery store on a sleepy Sunday, holding a basket, hair curled, and cheap perfume trailing behind her like a cloud of denial. I didn't need to fabricate anything. His own history was the bomb, and I simply handed people the match. She didn't notice me because I was bagging groceries at the end of the express lane, but I did notice her and who she was with. A tall, possibly late 40s man in a suit jacket over jeans who looked expensive but casual, as if he was trying to appear humble but failing miserably. They weren't holding hands, but their body language was undeniable. She was laughing, twisting her hair, performing that phony giggle she used when she wanted anything, and they went right by me. She didn't even look up, so I asked the cashier next to me, "Do you know who that guy is?" "Oh, him," she said. "That's David. Arrives often. He owns a handful of the IT businesses downtown." "I think he's loaded," said David, giving me my second opportunity. David Salvatore, owner of 3 small electronic stores in our county, did local commercials, had a LinkedIn, and even an Instagram where he mostly posted photos of the stores, a couple of trade show photos, and recently her. I waited until she left, then asked to take my break early. I stepped outside, took out my phone, and searched David's tech store hometown. A post from Valentine's Day was buried in the feed, a photo of a dinner plate, a candlelit table, and just visible at the edge of the frame, her hand, the ring she always wore, with the caption, "Best V-Day I've had in years." Lucky man, that confirmed it. She'd landed someone new, someone with money, which meant she had something to lose. And that was my third opening. I spent the next 2 months building the pieces of what would become the setup. First, I revamped Packlight, got serious, registered the business, opened a P.O. box, applied for a micro grant from a nonprofit that helped youth entrepreneurs, and got it. I used the funds to invest in inventory, automate parts of my fulfillment process, and even hire a part-time web designer from a freelancing site to polish the site and rebrand it. Then, I created a special section on the website, Packlight Partners, a program for businesses to sponsor care packages for youth shelters, complete with branded thank you notes, social media shoutouts, and a community partner badge. Guess who I contacted? David's Stores. I used a fake name, posed as the marketing manager, and sent a formal pitch via email, complete with mock-ups. I knew he'd bite. He was exactly the kind of guy who wanted to appear generous. We went back and forth for a week and eventually, I got a confirmation. "This looks great. I'm happy to donate some accessories and be featured. Just keep our brand visible. My girlfriend loves this kind of community work." His girlfriend, of course, had spun some lie about how she used to work with kids or run support groups or whatever else she fed him. And now she was about to be publicly linked to my company, the company built by the son she abandoned. But I wasn't done yet. I needed one more thing. Receipts. So I started collecting them. Every Reddit thread, every photo of Aiden holding stolen goods, every comment from someone who claimed he owed them money, every blurry gym security photo, every Twitter rant, and every TikTok with flexing cash. I created a Google Drive folder with captions and sources, organized by date, and backed it up 6 times. Finally, I ordered one of my own care packages, but this one contained something special. A typed letter signed with my full name and addressed to David. Inside, I thanked him for supporting youth like me and mentioned how I started the business after being kicked out of my home at the age of 19 with no support from my family. I didn't mention names because I didn't need to. I let the timeline, tone, and emotional weight speak for themselves. I wanted him to ask questions, and I wanted her to sweat, because now I had everything. I wasn't going to drop the bomb just yet. I wanted her to see who I'd become, what I'd built from the ashes she left behind, and the proof of her betrayal, a platform she couldn't ignore, and a reputation she was just beginning to build, one that I could demolish with a single truth. That's when the real revenge would begin. The finest form of vengeance doesn't show up in a blaze of glory or a screaming brawl in a parking lot. Instead, it enters quietly, takes a seat at the table you built, and calmly waits for your adversaries to realize they're eating their own consequences. That's precisely what I did. After David agreed to be featured as a Packlight partner, I waited 3 weeks before the campaign launched, just enough time to set the stage. I updated the site, made it look professional and minimalistic with clean lines, soft colors, and big text thanking David's store for sponsoring care packages for underprivileged youth. Then I added one final touch, a spotlight story on the homepage, a personal essay titled, Kicked Out at 19. Now I'm sending help to children like me. It was brief, no more than 600 words, no names, no crying dramatics, just my voice, calm, clear, and devastatingly honest. I told the narrative of the morning I turned 19, the packed suitcase, the closed door, the understanding that I wasn't loved, simply tolerated until I was no longer legally necessary. I wrote about sleeping in a laundromat, missing my scholarship offer, and discovering I'd been replaced in my own home. I didn't beg for sympathy, I just told the truth. At the end of the essay, I thanked our new business partners, including a local electronics company owned by a man who reminds me that there are kind, generous adults out there. I knew my mother would see it. David followed the company's Instagram, and I tagged him in the post that published the story, which quickly gained popularity. Small accounts, non-profit sites, and a handful of local influencers reposted it, and the shelter where I used to stay even wrote a remark expressing their pride in me. 3 days later, I received a message from David, which was brief, consisting of only a few lines. David. Hi Ethan. I just read your tale on the website. This is powerful stuff. Forgive me for asking, but is your mother's name Laura? I gazed at the computer, my heart pumping, and finally typed, me. Yeah, she is. He didn't respond right away, but I knew I had thrown a bomb into his carefully manicured picture of her. 2 days later, I received a call from a number I didn't know. I let it ring, and it was her voicemail, breathy and frightened. Hey Ethan, I noticed what you had written. I believe we need to chat, please. I didn't react. The next day, another voicemail arrived, followed by a third, each more desperate than the last. By the end of the week, the Packlight Instagram had a rush of new followers. Many others commented on the post, sharing their own experiences, but a select handful had something different to say. Hi, is that the same Laura from Unit 14C? Wait, she's the mother. Wow, I booted him out for Aiden. That lady was always sketchy. I knew it. Then, someone, not me, put a link in the comments to the Reddit threads regarding Aiden, the gym thefts, the frauds, and the phone locker drama, which spread swiftly. The lady who claimed to be a devoted guardian of a problematic adolescent had booted out her own son and covered up the misdeeds of a boy with a developing reputation for stealing. Once that fire was set, it was impossible to put out. Within days, people were putting it all together. David contacted us again, this time with less interest and more sadness. David. She said you fled away. She said you were trouble and that she had protected your relative from an awful household. I believed her. I'm sorry. I didn't respond since there was nothing to say. He simply ended his sponsorship with no fuss or headlines, but I observed that all of her images disappeared from his Instagram over a few days, followed by the consequences. Aiden was arrested 2 days before my 21st birthday for attempting to sell stolen laptops on Facebook Marketplace under his real name. The cops traced the serial numbers back to a community center that had been robbed a week before, and he was caught on camera, and guess who showed up on the local police blotter? You guessed it, Laura Williams, 46, charged with obstruction and possession of stolen property. When the cops came knocking, she tried to hide the laptops in the crawl space, claiming they were donations and she didn't know they were stolen. They didn't buy it, and her mugshot was grainy. She appeared older and worn, as if she had just realized the party was ended and the check had bounced. I preserved the photo to remind myself that karma exists, even if it moves slowly. David severed relations with her, and I heard from someone at the business that he was upset. She attempted to play the victim, claiming I was lying. The internet had twisted the story, but the receipts were public. The truth didn't need my defense. It stood on its own. She lost the apartment soon after. She couldn't pay rent without David. Electronic stores stopped donating to her causes, and she tried to crowdfund for legal fees, but it failed. Someone linked my essay to a GoFundMe page, but the goal never exceeded $100. I never went to see her, never called, because I'd already won. Not by shouting, not by slamming doors, but by living well, by creating something she couldn't touch, and by becoming the man she said I'd never be. Today, I run Packlight full-time, ship nationwide, and work with shelters in 4 states. I've spoken at conferences, mentored teens who've gone through worse, and my story has been featured on a few podcasts and even a nonprofit documentary crew. But I don't tell this story to make people feel sorry for themselves. Rather, I tell it to remind them. Sometimes the people who should defend you won't. Sometimes family isn't blood, and sometimes the finest vengeance is quiet, calculated, and served cold, complete with tracking, delivery, and a handwritten thank you card.